Hello, everyone. My name is Maureen McDowell, and I am the founder and executive director of Keep St. Pete Lit. We are a literary arts organization based in St. Petersburg, Florida, and this is episode 26 of Typewriter Talks, where we interview Tampa Bay authors and get inside their brains and their writing process. And today we have Sam Obeid, and she is a spoken word artist and activist. Thank you for being here, Sam.
My greatest pleasure. Thank you for having me, Maureen.
Yes. So tell us what you're working on right now.
So currently, well, spoken word wise or overall, yeah, well, currently, activism against anti-Black racism and justice for Black and brown humans is a huge conversation, right, in the country and especially in the Tampa Bay area. So activism has been something that I've been well involved in since May 30th after George Floyd was murdered. And so that has taken up definitely a lot of time, as it should, being out there in the streets, doing the things, keeping my comrades safe from harm, from other humans, right? Just doing the things that need to be done. Working on that, of course, as program director of Community Tampa Bay, my full-time job keeps me busy, especially with schools now open, working with young humans on anti-discrimination work. That's what we do at CTB. We're a community, we're an organization whose vision is a community free from all forms of discrimination. We work with people of all ages and levels, but right now, mostly we're working with a lot of organizations who are looking to do their due diligence and change their company culture to be more inclusive. So there's a lot of work that comes into play there. Like I said, with schools having open now, and like some of our stuff moving back in person, and then a lot of our stuff being virtual, just a lot has been going on in terms of the multivarious ways in which we ourselves at the organization interact with anti-discrimination work. As far as poetry is concerned, there's a few special things that I'm working on. I was recently very honored to be published by HarperCollins India in a text called An Anthology of South Asian Queer Poetry. Very foundational moment in my life, milestone moment in my life, because South Asian queer poetry is just not something that I ever expected to be a thing, right? Yeah. Or to be part of an anthology that has dozens and dozens of other South Asian queer poets putting together. And so that was like a huge highlight for me this year. Very humbling, very honorable, right? I'm very honored by it. And so that was a big thing that happened. And right now I'm working on a massive poetry immigration project.
Oh.
Yeah,
talk about it at all, or it's still?
Yeah, I can talk about it. I haven't spoken about it because it's still in its planning stages. Yeah. So it's not a secret or anything. I just haven't had an opportunity to talk about it per se. But it's still in its planning stages. The plan is to create a multimedia poetry piece by way of which, so I have about, I want to say, a solid 8 kilos of documentation. I've been in the country for 13 years. So you can understand, like every year renewing something different, so on and so forth.
You had to leave like about a year ago.
2 years ago.
Yeah.
2 years ago now, actually. 2 years ago, 10 days from now, I would have come back from India.
Yeah.
Right. So I had to leave. So that was a huge immigration moment for me, not knowing if I was going to be able to come back to the States or not. Yeah. And then finally, like 2 months later, making it back to the US. Again, big point in my life, right? And so that's really where this immigration project is coming from. That's the space from which it's coming from. I just haven't had the mental capacity to engage it until now, right? There's a lot of healing that I've had to do. There's a lot of work on other forms that were more immediate, more necessary. And I'm fortunate enough to say that this isn't this wasn't an urgent piece that needed to be done, right? Yeah. And so I could wait and take my time to do it. And so, like I said, it's a multimedia poetry project. And what I'm looking at doing is using all of the paperwork that I have, okay? And having members from my community, I'm thinking members from my youth community, people who are not part of the poetry community for this reason, because they will kind of see my vision and me in what I'm asking them to do. And I want it to be as blank slate as possible. Yeah. So I want to bring my young humans into it. I want to bring like other folks, whoever's interested, into it. Basically get a large 6x4 canvas, right? Make copies of all of my immigration paperwork with, of course, stuff redacted. So
Yeah.
my personal information is not on it,
Mhm.
right? And then have them chop up all of these copies of immigration paperwork into various bits and create a collage on the 6x4 canvas, right? And so the 6x4 canvas will be filled with immigration documentation chopped up into various pieces. I will then, in real time, use redaction methods to
Mhm.
create a poem
Oh, I
from
love
that
it.
collage.
And that's such a healing process probably for you also. Like you
I
can
hope so.
share, because people in your network knew what you went through, but I
Mm-hmm.
think that if the larger audience could see it, and then it could be a larger body of work and open
Right.
up these spaces for conversation.
Absolutely. And what I hope to do is to have this collage up somewhere and then almost like, I don't know if you could call it a reception, but whatever you like, exhibit time or whatever you want to call it, right? And have people actually be there when
Yeah.
I'm doing the redaction so they can
Oh,
view
cool.
from a distance. They can view what is happening in the moment, so it's not all behind closed doors and then you get to see the final product. I'm
Yeah.
a fan of immersion and having people there when things are happening, be part of the process, right? You can
Yeah.
absolutely be part of the process.
So
And
it,
so
yeah, go ahead.
every single, no, you're fine. Every single time that, so once the poem is done and it's actually up there, it still continues to be immersive regardless of whether they are part of the process or not in the actual creation of the poem, because it's redacted from many pieces of documentation. So when you come up and you read it, you're still doing the work to figure out where the various lines of the poem are, and
Mm,
you might read it differently.
yeah.
You still have to put all those different pieces together, because you might have 2 words in the first line and then 7 words in the second, and then your third word, I might redact the entire fourth sentence and have the third line in the fifth, where the fifth line is at, things like that. So it's work that's happening. And so I feel like with each sentence, it will read and resonate to people differently.
And it's also like you're still in the immigration process. So it's not like so by having this piece going, people become almost part of your process because
Correct.
it's not done for you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I love that you're taking from, spoken word, but you're moving it into a performance piece and an art installation. Like that's where my brain's going too with my own
absolutely.
poetry,
Yeah.
So I love it.
Yeah. But art installation piece, that's where it's at for me, because I want to do more work that can engage more people constantly and not have the arrogance of saying, well, I need to be there to share it with you for you to know this story or for you to hear this poem,
Yeah.
Which sometimes, I mean, I'm not saying that all spoken word poets feel like that. I have felt like that in the past, like how do I share my work beyond myself? Like, what does that look like? For other immigrants who are going through the same thing that I'm going through.
Yeah.
Not an isolated experience by any means, for other people to feel like they too, oh my God, somebody knows what I'm going through. Someone's going through a slightly different immigration process than I'm going through, but we're still going through the immigration process together.
Yeah.
So.
And I love the idea also, like, as an executive director and a mother and a poet myself, I'm moving into a space like, how do I create systems that I can still share my work or have an impact on the community, but also have the quiet time to write and contemplate and have fun,
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's, you're creating space where you don't necessarily have to be there, but you can do these other things like activist work and your full-time job and other things in teaching and putting these systems in place. We think we always have to be in every situation at all times for it to resonate, but you're almost cloning yourself. You're creating a system that clones you so you can do other things too.
I like that. I never thought of it like that. I like that.
Well, it's also like some days I'll go with the organization. I'm like, we don't have anything going on. And they're like, wait a minute, we have 11 events going on because I have all these systems in place,
Right.
that because it was necessity. Like, how do we have maximum impact efficiently? Like, how do you be effective and efficient? And being a poet, I think your brain kind of works like that anyway, because you take these big ideas and then distill them into this small
Great.
space. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it works for being a community organizer or an executive director. It's interesting though.
Absolutely.
So tell us about some of your themes in your writing.
So a lot of my themes do revolve around immigration, but a lot of my themes also revolve around gender and sexuality. I'm Indian, I'm masculine performing, I'm a lesbian, right? So all of those pieces, I'm Hindu on one side of my family, Muslim on the other side of my family. I'm a person of color, I identify as a woman, so there's just a lot of intersectionalities of identity. So I think a lot of what I write about the tensions between all of those identities, depending on where I'm geographically and familiarly placed, right? So what does it look like to be a lesbian in India? What does it look like to be a masculine performing human in India? What does it look like to be a woman in India? What did that experience look like? And what are the various stories that I have from that experience? That is a past life of mine. I left India when I was 23 years old, right? And certainly between the ages of 23 and 24, while I was in the US, I did not do anything but long for the life that I had before, despite the fact that this was the life that I chose, because homesickness is a real thing, and I had a very real partner back then, and I had a great job back then. I had a whole family, and then I was here searching for my freedom, but completely alone.
Yeah.
So it's a dichotomy of situations, right? And then 24 onward, because of something that happened in my personal life, 24 onward, I just started recreating myself. And I always refer to the life that I lived in India as my past life, right?
Yeah.
Because people always ask, how do you get over that? The that they're talking about is the then love of my life, is now married, had an arranged marriage. And so is now married to a man of her family's choosing. She's very happy with her life. I'm very happy with my life. All of that, the tragedy of it has long since passed. However, in that moment, it was incredibly tragic. And so people always ask, how do you ever get over that? And I tell people, you don't. You get through it, but you never get over it, right? But the recreating of my life and the reference to my past life is almost like I'm not that person anymore. When I lost this human, that person died with that human, because I did not know who I was without that human.
Oh, wow.
Right? Like we were very much interwoven into each other's lives, and I was very much, my priorities were her happiness.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's young love, it's very relevant.
All encompassing.
Correct. All encompassing. Very valid at the same time, right? Like love like that is beautiful. And in my much more adult life now, I don't know love like that. And I don't wish to experience love like that. I don't allow love like that in my life, right? And so I always refer to that life as my past life. Like that human died with that experience.
I get it.
And then this human is who I am now. And this human, I actually willfully and consciously and intentionally have created. Who I am now is of my own creation and nobody else's. So there's a huge point of pride for me in that. So those are the things. What a question you asked. And
I love what you're saying though, because what's great about all your recipe, I love that term of your recipe. Like you do have that intersectionality. You have all these different perspectives, and especially as a mentor to young people, they can relate to you depending on what road they're coming in on, but also like to tell them that you completely recreated your life. And I get it as somebody that I was with somebody at 19 and I was with him till 38 and my whole world and young love, and met him when I was 16. And it's like, as soon as I left him and that ended, Keep St. Pete Lit started that same year. And I had this whole new life and a whole new group of friends and a whole new world that I would not have been able to have in that relationship. So I get that, like recreating, but like to be able to teach children that, that you can create your own reality, essentially.
Absolutely. And with my young humans, like I'll say is I'm never their mentor. I'm always their peer, because they teach me just as much as I learn. I learn from them just as much as they learn from me, so it's a very circular process between us, right? And so I think like I'm just happy for them. I'm happy to be the person that I needed when I was 16.
Yeah.
Right? Because I know that that's who I needed in that moment. So there's a lot of gratitude from my end that they would even allow me to be in their lives. I'm still an adult, there's a lot of mistrust there. Them allowing me into their lives and having the conversations that they have with me, I mean, that's my privilege. That's not, there's no expectation from them that they should do that. That is totally and completely their love for me.
But you also, you have such a warmth and a strength and a leadership quality. Like we can't ignore you and we don't want to ignore you because
I appreciate that.
you have this presence about you and you have this wisdom, but you also have this vulnerability about you that when someone's around you, I think, yes, you may be the adult, but you're so captivating. Like children want to hear what you have to say, especially,
I appreciate that. Yeah, I
because
appreciate
the recipe.
Yeah, yeah. I think young humans with, I mean, pardon my French, but they cut through the bullshit is
Yeah.
basically what they do. They see you for exactly who you are, you know? So if you're this, you know, if you're this adult who's like, yeah, I'm, you know, like I hear a lot of adults saying, yeah, I have no problem hanging out with young humans. I tell them exactly the way that it is, right? And oftentimes when adults say, I tell them exactly how it is, it means I am very comfortable engaging in disrespect with young humans to tell them exactly how it is, right? That is not my process.
Yeah.
I respect my young humans the way I respect anybody else. Them being, what does age have to do with it? Them being under 18 only means they can't vote. It doesn't mean anything else. They're still full human beings.
Yeah.
Right? And nobody is ever really a grown up.
No.
You know, like I don't even know what that means. Like I've been 5 feet tall since I was under 18. So what is a full grown up really? You know? It makes absolutely no sense because if we all conditioned ourselves to the idea that we are constantly learning, you know, then we're all children all the time. Like what difference does it make, right? So coming from that same space of respect is incredibly important for me. And I think that's what it is. I don't think it's as much me being who I am as much as it is my young humans seeing me for who I am.
Yeah.
And for me, particularly, that is very validating because adults do not offer me the same courtesy.
Yeah.
Adults do not afford me the same respect that they do.
And why do you think that is? I mean, that's kind of a big question to unpack, but
bias, stereotypes, discrimination. Yeah, you're authentic, but let me put you in your place.
Yeah.
You know, who looks at somebody like me and says lady 5 times in the same sentence? Adult men, because they want to put you in your place.
Yeah. It makes them feel better. It makes them comfortable. It's all about them.
Mm-hmm. Or I know women like you. Really? I doubt it. What does that even mean?
Yeah, right.
You must have some pretty boss humans in your life. Why are you the way you are if you know women?
An asshole.
Thank you.
You really
if you know so many women like me, why are you still such an asshole? I don't believe that. Right.
Amen.
Amen.
Yeah. So what advice would you give your younger writer self?
My younger writer self. Well, I didn't start writing spoken word poetry until 2012, but my younger writer self always used to write, you know? So I would tell her, don't do anything differently. You're on the right path. You're solid. Where you are is where you were meant to be. Mm-hmm. It's a hard place, but relying on you being the girl that you were is what has helped me become the boy that I am. So thank you.
You should have that on a t-shirt. I love that. I love that. It's awesome.
I would say thank you to her because she went through a lot so I could become the one.
Sounds like it. Yeah. But yeah, thank you. I think about that. Like, thank you to the past Maureen. You know, even some of my poetry, I'll read it and it's like a whole different person wrote that, but it's exactly what I need now. So I always thank past Maureen for giving present Maureen something, right. You know, and
she was lucky, man.
Who are some of your favorite writers, authors, writers?
So a lot of the stuff that I read is, you know, non-fictional works, right? Love Toni Morrison. Well, Toni Morrison writes a lot of fiction, but also a lot of like Toni Morrison's essays and stuff like that on the state of the world, commentary on the state of the world, right? Toni Morrison's one of my favorite authors. Arundhati Roy, I love her writing because it's closer to how I write prose. It's very Indian English, right? Well, she's Indian, so it's very Indian English. It's she has a lot of really long sentences, which Americans call run-ons. We just call complex sentences. Right?
Yeah.
You know, so I love her work. I love theory by writers like Gayatri Spivak, you know, who talks about subaltern humans and subaltern voices and she checks her own shit. So I absolutely love that about her, you know. So Can the Subaltern Speak was a very breakthrough text for me in understanding activism and what activism can look like, and how activism has been colonized on so many levels.
Yeah.
Right? How we need to decolonize activism. So writers like that, for the most part, you know, not a lot of, honestly, like not a lot of new reading. I know there's a lot of writers that are writing a lot of new things on anti-racism and so on and so forth. And I will read excerpts from a lot of these writers, right? But many of these writers are American writers.
Yeah.
Not to throw shade on anyone, it just, I can't connect from a very strongly American perspective. I don't, it's too narrow of a viewpoint for me. I need a global viewpoint for me to be able to connect to something.
Yeah.
You know, because then I look at I always like read these texts and I'm like, my God, but the American privilege in this text.
Yeah.
You know? And it doesn't check that, right? And I don't find that from global writers. I find global, especially third world writers, constantly writing from a third world perspective, right? Which is a grassroots, bottom up perspective. And I learn from that space, right? Like it further encourages humility coming from that place, right? But when I read predominantly American texts, nonfiction American texts on the state of the movement right now, it angers me because there's such a lack of humility in its writing.
Yeah. Yeah. I just took a class on embodied activism. And it was really interesting. It was taught by a non-binary, I guess, female performing, I'm trying, woman.
Femme performing.
And gender performing. And then an African-American woman. And it was just talking about like even how activism is so externally focused and we don't do enough internal, we don't take care of ourselves enough. And even like some people are good on the front lines, but there's so many other things you can do in activism behind the scenes and other ways. And even the way people communicate and talk over each other, and it's very yang energy. And it was really interesting to talk about all the different ways that you can be an activist with still staying in your body and taking care of yourself. So I found that was really, I needed that because I'm a highly sensitive person and will get burned out really quickly with too much, you know, if I'm around a big group of people, I feel everybody's stuff that's going on and I get caught up in their stories, and it's like, I can't stay in my lane. You know, you figure out what your lane is and do your work in your lane.
Yeah. And I think a huge part of what self-care lacks is accountability, you know, which where all these problems start from the get, right? So yes, okay, you're a good activist, you're a great activist, you're doing all the things, you're out there, so on and so forth. But am I also questioning, from my perspective, am I also questioning, did I talk over somebody while I was doing this? Why did I do that? You know, okay, I didn't mean to do it. I didn't realize I was doing it. Did I apologize? Because they might have realized that I was doing it, you know? So what does that look like? Right? So what kind of space am I creating in this process? You know, am I humble enough to apologize? If I'm not, what am I going to do to get there?
Yeah. That applies to everything. Like that can, all your relationships you have as a creative and in general, like, you know, you want to be constant introspective and checking yourself and not just railroading people or railroading your ideas through, and have that kind of collaborative space. So another question, like when you get blocked, what gives you inspiration?
Oh, I get blocked a lot. I think like inspiration. So for me, I want to explain this, and I want to explain this as clearly as I possibly can. For me, writing is not an enjoyable process, right? It's cathartic. I'm good at it, right? But it's not an enjoyable process. I don't sit, you know, and I think many writers will agree with me when they say this, that no one sits down to write about their trauma and is like, yes, I'm so excited about this. Let me do this, right? It's a very traumatic process for me, right? And I really don't get, it's cathartic, but I don't get as much catharsis out of it as I would have hoped, you
Yeah.
know. And again, like, obviously I'm only speaking for myself in this process, right? But from the get, I've never written for myself. I've always written for other people. I think the stories that I tell are important to be told so that the conversations after the fact can happen. My
Yeah.
favorite part of doing a show is sharing the things that I share, and then, you know, talking to people after the show in terms of what connections can we make with each other, or maybe you connected to this poem in a different way than I connected with it, or maybe like what I said in a poem connected with you
Yeah.
in a way that made you feel some type of way about it. You know, what does that look like, right? So all of those pieces of conversation is why I do it, because for me visibility is very important. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and I know that there's not a lot of humans on the same intersections of identity that I experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so creating those connections and creating that visibility, not being alone, not feeling isolated in our experiences, is very important to me. So my catharsis comes from when that video goes up on YouTube or whatever it is, and I read all the comments and I know, okay, I did my due diligence.
Yeah.
You know, that it comes from that space, right? So that's about it. You know, like, that's the level to which I necessarily get a lot out of it, right? But when I get blocked, oftentimes I let it be. I
Yeah.
don't do anything about it. You know, I'm blocked because my brain and my body is not ready to go there yet.
Yeah.
You know, this is my self telling me, shut up and sit down.
Mm-hmm.
Not right now. Don't do it. Right? Because what am I writing for? You know, I'm definitely not one of those poets who thinks, again, this is only me, right? I want to be very clear about that.
Yeah.
I'm definitely not one of those poets who, you are a poet if you sit down and write every day. Says who? I don't believe in false laws or false rules. Those are false things. I am a poet because I am a poet.
Mm-hmm.
And I would challenge anybody to tell me anything otherwise,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Anything else about myself otherwise. I sit down and write when the writing calls to me. That's what I do. You know, I sit down and edit when the poem says, edit me now.
Yeah.
You know,
That's,
and for me, that it's a very spiritual process.
it's the same for me. I get it.
Yeah.
I get it.
So,
I actually, nothing frustrates me more. I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but I'm going to say it. Just a dead poem that just, you read this poem and you're just like, I just wasted, what am I getting out of that? You're not changing my mind. You're not showing me a new perspective. You're not, because I really think poetry is about kind of shifting your viewpoint and shifting your mindset and making you feel, even if you're just talking about a teacup, or, you know, simple things, mundane day to day, but making you kind of appreciate life more and see life differently, or heal, or see a new perspective. And poetry that just doesn't do that, it's just
mm-hmm.
like, you missed the mark. Because it is such a calling, I think, to be a poet. It's such a specific, it's such a specific calling to choose that over prose. And some people can do both, but it's such a special like path to take on this, you know, in this world, in this life. So one more question, and then we're going to hear some of your work. What would be your holy grail piece of writing advice?
Holy grail piece of writing advice. I think, especially if you're writing about something that is trauma based, which is usually what most of my writing looks like, right? Come to it honestly, come to it authentically, and write it knowing that nobody is entitled to your story. You don't have to give us all the details. Who are we to ask you for it?
Yeah.
Write it from a place of, this is what I am willing to share. Find consent with yourself in your writing.
I love that.
Right?
Yeah.
You don't need anybody else's consent to write your piece, but you need your own consent to write your piece.
Yeah.
And nobody is ever entitled to your story. Your story comes to us because you were generous enough to tell it. That is my
response right now. Yeah, be your own consent. Yeah. Yeah, I do see some young poets, and they put it all out there, and then they're on the stage and they just like open their wound up, and I don't know if they have the capacity to handle putting their whole story out there, but they feel that they have to. And I love that you say that it's your choice. You might just do it every decade, add a little more to the story, or what, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There are no rules. I love that. So,
and I know that when I first wrote, I don't know if you've heard my poem Smack, about my confrontation with an Indian policeman.
Yes, you have. Yeah, you performed that at the Poetry Open Mic for us at the studio.
Right. And so when I did that poem, initially when I did that poem, one of my friends looked at it and was like, well, you can't just leave us hanging like this. Tell us what else happened. And I was like, no, that it's done. That's all I need you to know. Yeah, but it's not fair to your audience. You can't just leave them hanging like that. Like, what are we supposed to think about what happened? You're supposed to think, I'm standing right here in front of you. Clearly, I'm okay. Now back up. You know, like chill, right?
Yeah.
So that is where that piece of advice comes from. No one's entitled to your story.
I love that. Well, let's hear some of your work.
That's all. Okay. So I'm going to read this piece for y'all because it's not memorized yet. I did write it 2 years ago, but it's not.
I can't memorize my work, so be you. Yeah.
It's called the Immigrant Poem. And this is how it goes. Some days, the most honest thing that I can do for myself is to listen to the sound of my heart beating. In the morning, right before I wake, right before reality seeps its way through to remind me of this thing called surviving, there is a brief moment before I open my eyes, when the only sound I hear is the soft snore of my puppy peaceful at the edge of my bed and the loud, persistent comfort of my beating heart. I wonder, is this what freedom sounds like? I watch young white boys get their driver's permits like awards that celebrate the mediocrity they will shine on for the rest of their lives. Tongues carved in colonial tradition, learning only ignorance as second language, speaking of the legality of a back door while lining the gates at the front with guns aimed at Black and brown children. This country is not a nation of immigrants. It is a land that was imagined on the genocide of native humans, built on the backs of slaves and devised to hold the heads of minorities underwater while still forcing us to breathe. The life of an immigrant woman is not for the faint-hearted. It requires years of practice walking on eggshells around your own existence, testing the pain tolerance of your skin, looking around your own home to see if anyone's watching when you kiss your lover, watching over your shoulder when dancing at a nightclub, hoping that you don't accidentally speak your beloved first language while at an airport. I wonder if I'll ever hear my heart beating without trying. Perhaps this is what freedom sounds like. Millions of hearts across the world beating harder every day. I wonder if this is why mothers of dead children cradle their heads to their chests so the last thing their souls will hear is the steady beat of a mother's heart over the deafening sound of a racist bullet. I wonder if the founding fathers held their palms over their hearts when taking the Pledge of Allegiance to drown out the humanity of their heartbeats. I wonder if faith leaders rely on their heartbeat to give them rhythm when reciting prayers so they can drown out the sound of hate. I know that my heartbeat gets louder with every line of this poem because my word is my everything. I know that an activist speaks from their heart no matter how afraid their mind is. I know that no wall can keep our community away from each other as long as our hearts are beating. I wonder if freedom will ever be our first language. I know this fight won't end in my lifetime. This legacy has outgrown its roots, but decades from now, when this country elects to its highest office, a queer, transgender, hijabi Muslim woman of color who came to this country undocumented, ran her whole campaign on her history of being a sex worker, partnered with a gender non-conforming woman of color who raises pit bulls as children, I know then we will hear the future of their heartbeats beating loud and clear, sounding well over the history of white supremacist patriarchy, and none of us will ever forget where we came from. Oh, that was intense. I've done this poem so many times and sometimes it just gets to me.
Gosh, thank you for being you. I don't know what else to say. I'm emotional and I'm just like, oh, I mean, the whole time I'm just like, it's like your words are like waves that go over you and like all these images and feelings and thoughts and all, like you just, it's such a patriotic poem, you know. It's such it's an American poem. Like I'm trying to take those words back. Like, this is such a wonderful country in so many ways and so fucked up in so many other ways, you know. Like the Statue of Liberty, give me your tired, huddled, or tired, poor, huddled masses yearning to breathe free. And I love that the heartbeat is freedom. And there's so many elements to, why this country is why you're here now. But then there's so many other elements where it's just like, oh, are you kidding me?
I think I'm here because of the promise of what immigrants can make this country to be, not necessarily what this country has been. Right. Yeah. There's a lot of empty promises that the country makes, and so it's disappointing for people like me who come here to get away from the exact same fascism that is prevalent in our home countries. And then that's exactly what we are met with here 13 years down the line, right? Not like it hasn't always been around, but now even more amplified than ever.
Yeah.
You know, and a lot of people have asked me in my past why, when I went to India in 2018, but with everything that's happening here, it just seems like you might have been better off there, right? And that's such a privileged thing to bloody say, right?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
How about you ask me that question instead of telling me how I should actually feel?
Yeah.
Right? Or like, how many years have you lived in India for?
Mm-hmm.
None? Shows.
Yeah.
You know, so things like when people say things like that, it's incredibly, this is, America is better for me to be in than India. But I'm not going to be grateful for, should be so grateful to be here that I'm not there. That's not the comparison that I'm looking for. I'm looking to live a full life is what I'm looking for, you know, and I will fight for that for me and my comrades.
And everyone's entitled to that.
Exactly.
To be able to be their best selves.
If anyone is entitled to anything, that's what they're entitled to.
That's what they're, yeah. So
right.
Thank you for being your best self with us.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
Yes. And I'm Maureen McDole, the founder and executive of Keep St. Pete Lit. This is Typewriter Talks. Thank you so much, Sam. We will be here next Tuesday for episode 27. And if you want to know more about Keep St. Pete Lit, you can go to keepstpetelit.org. We have book clubs, writing classes, poetry open mics, all kinds of things. So thank you, Sam. And thank you everyone for watching. See you next week.